Hello, this is Transfer Talk. We are 2 days away from the deadline and we have some potentially huge moves in the offing. Raheem Sterling, Jadon Sancho, Ivan Toney, Manuel Ugarte and maybe, just maybe, Victor Osimhen too. So much to discuss this hour. Liverpool are making a move to sign Federico Chiesa. We have got the latest on that this hour, plus the view from Italian football expert Mina Rzouki. We're told talks are back on between Ipswich and Chelsea over a deal to sign striker Armando Broja. Plus, with Eddie Nketiah's move to Crystal Palace edging closer, will that mean Mikel Arteta has to sign a forward? Afternoon to you at home or wherever you're watching us, and also to Dan Bardell, Daniel Kahn and Nabeed Haroon, who are with us in the studio for today's Transfer Talk. We're going to start with Manchester United. Updates today on Manuel Ugarte and Scott McTominay. Dan, where do we stand?
Yeah, Dave, well, Manchester United have been pretty clear throughout this window this summer that for any incomings, we'd have to see outgoings for United this summer. And first of all, let's start with the big incoming in terms of Manuel Ugarte, the midfielder from PSG. We can tell you that he is in the UK, having his medical today. Fee is worth up to £50.5 million. United will pay an initial £42 million up front, plus £8.4 million in performance-related add-ons. In terms of the departures, as I mentioned, Scott McTominay now looking certain for that departure to Napoli. Of course, McTominay, he's been at United since the age of 5. That fee is worth £25.3 million, including performance-related add-ons. Also worth just mentioning in terms of departures, Hannibal Mejbri as well. He's been at United since the age of 16. They signed him from Monaco in 2019. Burnley, that deal is now confirmed. That happened in the last hour or so. There'll be an initial fee of £5.4 million for him. And again, I think as United have shown this summer, a lot of these deals for their young players or younger players have all included a sell-on clause, which this one includes up to 50%. So really good business for United once again.
There could be more incomings too at Manchester United because they are talking to Chelsea over 2 separate deals for Jadon Sancho and Raheem Sterling. All possible deals are on the table. That means a loan with an obligation and a permanent deal too. Any deal for Sterling would have to make financial sense for United, given the wages involved in his contract at Chelsea. Can we see this happening, this deal between the Manchester United and Chelsea?
Yeah, I think both the separate deals could end up happening. I think it's clear that both players need a change of scenery. Both seem to be surplus from requirements at their respective clubs. I think for Sancho, I see him being a better fit at Chelsea than Manchester United with the way that Maresca plays. Yes, Chelsea have a lot of options, but they're also going to have a lot of games this season to get through. It takes Sancho back to London as well, which I could see would be appealing to him, and he just needs to find a home. I think with how it's been in the last few years at Manchester United, not particularly stable, and then his loan at Dortmund where he kind of reminded everyone what a good player he is in that Champions League run. I think a move to Chelsea could kind of reinvigorate him a little bit, and with Sterling it's clear that he's not fancied by Maresca, but he's such an interesting move, Sterling going to Manchester United, having already played for Liverpool, Manchester City, Chelsea. Not many players, or if any, have ever taken up those destinations in the way he has. But I think he would go there and offer Manchester United something different and actually be an upgrade in many ways. I know we're going to talk about the options that they have on the flanks, but I see Sterling as being someone who could go there and make an impression, go there with a point to prove. So I think it's one of those deals that I think it benefits both clubs and it benefits both players as well.
OK, well, let's find out. How does Sterling compare to what United already have in their squad?
Well, yesterday night on Soccer Special, Troy Deeney on the panel said if Raheem Sterling was to make the move to Old Trafford, then he would be better than what they already have in those positions. So very interesting to then compare them. Just worth noting before we look into some of the players here, Ahmad, who of course has been playing a right midfield, or right wing I should say, for United. He of course didn't play too much last season, so he's not here, but we'll show you 3 other options United have at their disposal. Looking at games played, of course, Raheem Sterling played quite a lot for Chelsea last season, whether that was on the left wing or the right wing. Compared to the others, they all played a decent amount of games, but let's go on and find out a bit more about how they performed last season in the Premier League. Raheem Sterling got a few goals last season, and he has done consistently for Chelsea last season. Antony, perhaps, as we know, struggled a little bit towards or throughout the season to find his best form. But Marcus Rashford, Alejandro Garnacho, playing predominantly on the left wing, both contributed to United, but perhaps Garnacho a bit more consistent. Let's look at the assists. In terms of that, there's probably not a lot really to look into that, really, in terms of to differentiate between these players. The only thing I would probably highlight is Marcus Rashford perhaps didn't really reach those levels of previous seasons last year, and Antony again struggling, but Raheem Sterling, Garnacho perhaps in front as we go through last season. Looking at the minutes per goal, again, we've already talked about Antony's struggles last season, but Raheem Sterling here, 247.6 minutes per goal, but his games played were slightly lower. You look at Marcus Rashford, Garnacho, who predominantly played on the left wing, were perhaps a bit more consistent on that front as well, considering they played more games. Chances created now, and this is where I would probably draw my own conclusions, because I think when you look at Alejandro Garnacho, of course, he has played a lot of games for someone so young, but he's really made that left wing position his own when he's had the opportunities. You look at Raheem Sterling, he's able to do a little bit as well on both wings, considering he did change position a little bit. The other two, Antony and Marcus Rashford, not so much. But let's look at touches in the opposition box next. And again, I think this is where, when it does come up, Alejandro Garnacho, when it does come up, it's absolutely fine. But what I will say is, when we did look at those stats earlier, Garnacho was really leading the four of them again. And for me, Raheem Sterling could be a good addition because he can play both the wings, of course. But for me, if that maybe stumps Garnacho's progression, is it worth it? I mean, what do you both think?
I've been surprised that Garnacho has not started the season for Manchester United, given his productivity last season. And whenever I watched Manchester United last season, I thought he was their best player. I was very, very impressed. So a little bit of a surprise that he sat out the first two games, albeit he's an excellent option for Manchester United to have from the bench. And maybe perhaps that tells you something about how good Diallo's been on the wing for him to have got the nod on the right-hand side. My concern would be, if you look at all those players other than Antony, Sterling, Rashford, Garnacho, would you say that, Nabaid, that all of them, their best positions on the left?
Probably, and so then you've kind of got the problem of where does Sterling fit in, but as we saw at City, Sterling can play off the right. Sterling can also play through the middle, to be honest. I think the big key difference for me is he's a goal scorer, and Garnacho, although I completely agree, is probably Manchester United's most dangerous forward. He's still young, still often makes mistakes in front of goal. Rashford's been out of form, like Dan said. And then Antony, as you've seen by the stats, isn't someone who's going to score goals for you. So Sterling might be the one that gets them into double figures from a forward perspective, and that might be useful. But as you just said there, I don't know if an out-and-out left winger is exactly what United need at this point.
Do you think maybe they're earmarking Sterling to be on that right-hand side based on what he did for Manchester City that couple of years where he played right, stayed very wide and came into the box and got on the end of things? And it was the same with Sane on the other side. But it's obviously very different doing that for Manchester City in that team to what Manchester United are at the moment. And even in those first two games, I'm still not really sure what Manchester United are.
Well, Erik ten Hag has said that he's gone on record saying that he wants United to be the best transition team in the world. So does that suit Sterling?
I wouldn't say so. Sterling, that Manchester City period, sort of benefited from back post chances, lots of balls being put into the box. United don't put the ball in from the left-hand side because unless Shaw's fit, which he hasn't been, Mazraoui's he's two-footed, but he's a right-footed left-back. He's not going to be someone who gets down the line and crosses it in. And then in transition, Raheem Sterling is not as quick as he once was. He's definitely going to be someone who's going to be waiting for chances to come his way in and around the box. I actually said this a few years ago, that I feel like long-term he might end up being a fox-in-the-box centre-forward. So I don't know whether Manchester United and the transitional signing of Sterling makes much sense in terms of what they're trying to do. But I think it sort of speaks to the fact that, yes, they've got Sancho, and they sort of want to let Sancho go. Can we get someone in place?
I mean, we've been talking quite a lot there about Raheem Sterling, Jadon Sancho. Obviously, Chelsea aren't the only team in the race for Sancho, because Juventus is still pushing to sign the player. They're expected to propose a loan deal that would incorporate a loan fee plus a percentage of the wages that they would be able to pay. Juventus's proposal would require United to cover a portion of Sancho's salary. It's thought United would require the loan fee as well to be a substantial one. How have United got on in terms of sales, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, actually, when you look at it, because we were talking a bit earlier about Scott McTominay getting close to his move to Napoli, and also Hannibal confirming his move. But when you look at what United have done in the last decade, it's really interesting reading, because actually, with McTominay's fee going through, this is actually their second best window in the last decade in terms of sales. And I think what you have to also acknowledge is, the likes of Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Willy Kambwala are all part of that total as well. But what doesn't show up there are also the players who left at the end of last season, the likes of Rafa Varane, Anthony Martial, who left at the end of their contract. So wages-wise, they would have been off the books as well. So I think you do have to look at what United have done in terms of their new structure. Omar Barada in as CEO, Jason Wilcox as the technical director, and Dan Ashworth as the sporting director as well. They've been able to change United's strategy, and mentioned with Hannibal, we're seeing more of the likes of sell-on clauses that have been included in a lot of the players who have left the club. So you would hope, for United's point of view, in the future, they're going to recoup a bit more money if those players move on in the future. So it's a different strategy, and clearly it's worked so far in this window.
One of the biggest games in world football this weekend, live on Super Sunday, Manchester United versus Liverpool, is a 3:30 start on Sky Sports Premier League. Elsewhere today, talks continue between Ipswich Town and Chelsea over the signing of the striker Armando Broja. That deal broke down initially last week after an issue with Broja's medical. The original deal would have seen him arrive on an initial loan with then an obligation to buy him for a club record £30 million. That's if Ipswich stayed up. So still a little bit of work to do on this deal. Ipswich, for their part, looking at potential different options as well if it doesn't end up happening. How much does Armando Broja need a move to kind of reignite his career at the moment?
Desperately, I think he's hit a difficult patch in his career through no fault of his own, really, because he just suffered a really, really bad injury in that World Cup break coming back. Like when the warm-up games before Premier League football came back, Broja got a horrific injury playing a friendly against Villa, and he's never really recovered from it. I think his initial loan at Southampton, I would say, was relatively successful, but we saw at Fulham last year that a player that is low on confidence, a player that found himself surplus really as soon as he got to Fulham. Mooney's form didn't really help him, but he just never made his way into that Fulham team, and he went there to kind of rebuild himself, but ended up probably having a worse time than he would have done had he actually stayed at Chelsea. So you've got a young striker here that seriously needs to build up some confidence, but someone who I do still think there is some serious potential there. I think a move to Ipswich would be beneficial to both parties. I quite like what Ipswich are doing. I think when you're a newly promoted team, you're not necessarily sure about what's going to work when you've been promoted in terms of personnel up front and how you're going to play. I think Ipswich, they've already got Delap and Schmodix as forward options added to their ranks. I think adding Broja in there as well, that just gives them that little bit of variety, and then you kind of just hope that something sticks as the season goes on. But out of the newly promoted teams, they're probably the one whose business has impressed me the most. But if Broja does make this move to Ipswich, he couldn't really wish to be working under a better young manager, could he, in Kieran McKenna, and hopefully together they can get something out of him again.
I do wonder if the situation suits him, because I think at Southampton they were in a bit of a relegation dogfight, and I think he wanted that responsibility. Also does that for his country as well. When they're really struggling, he sort of goes, give it to me, I'll try and do something. So it might be a deal where it benefits him that he goes to Ipswich, he becomes the main man again. I'm surprised Southampton weren't after him again, and really surprised that Leicester, I know we're going to talk about them later, how they're just sat there watching strikers go in and out is beyond me, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, Ipswich have also confirmed the signing of Chiesa Ogbeni as well today. We'll talk about that in a little while. On the way next, we're going to be live to Brazil. Tim Vickery, our South American expert, joins us live. We're going to be talking Manchester United, Southampton, Nottingham Forest and Brighton. Plenty still to come. Welcome back to Transfer Talk. We can speak live now to our South American football expert, Tim Vickery, who is in Rio de Janeiro for us. Tim, great to see you once again. Manuel Ugarte, we've talked about him for most of this window. It looks now that Manchester United are going to get their man.
It does, yeah. This is what we always expected at the end of a kind of transfer window poker, that he would end up at Old Trafford. Just as an aside, you wonder where this leaves André, the Fluminense central midfielder, who was linked with Liverpool last year, and Fulham pulled out last week. We understood that he was plan B if United couldn't land Ugarte. Could be some late interest here from Nottingham Forest, who've obviously lost Danilo to a serious injury. Because André is a terrific central midfielder, recalled by Brazil, may well start next month in World Cup qualification. But Uruguay's Manuel Ugarte, yes, it looks like he's ended up where we always expected him to be, at Old Trafford. And
when you look at his style of play, he's obviously a combative midfielder. He gets around the pitch very well. Does he become a fan's favourite because of his style of play?
Yeah, I think superstar would be laying it on far too thick. I mean, I don't think he would see himself in that mould. It's before the time of most of you fine gentlemen, but a little bit like Charlie Watts drumming for the Rolling Stones. Let Jagger and Richards prance around and get all the plaudits while you hold the fort behind. But I think it's such a good fit because we saw through last season, and especially in that curtain raiser against Fulham, that hole in the centre of the United midfield, how easy they were to play through. He is the man, I think, to fill that hole. And what a start he could have if United decide they can get this done. They decide to throw him in the deep end because there aren't many more rivalries fiercer in England than Manchester United at home to Liverpool. And with Liverpool looking so deadly on the transition, that could really be a welcome to the Premier League, Manuel Ugarte.
Hi Tim, good to talk to you. Forest looking at a striker. Who are they looking at?
Well, they've looked at a number, but one that they've had a bid knocked back for is Pedro of Flamengo here in Rio. Now, he's a Brazil international. He's in the Brazil squad. They took him to the World Cup, although they didn't get a lot out of him. Now, Flamengo have knocked back this bid. It was something like 20 million euros. Flamengo value the player much, much higher, although he is 27. He had a go with Fiorentina a few years back, who gave up on him more or less instantaneously. But he's an absolute idol here. I would love to see it happen because he's a player that intrigues me. He's technically brilliant. He's wonderful in the penalty area, but he's not quick and he's not great back to goal. And outside the penalty area, he doesn't offer a great deal. So this could well be a player who's more suited to playing with a big club in Brazil where the defensive lines are deeper and that the game is happening more in the opposing penalty area. He may lack the kind of mobility that a club like Forest would need from a striker. But as I say, I think this is very, very unlikely to happen unless Forest significantly up their bid.
Hello, Tim. I just wanted to ask you about someone Southampton have opened talks with in terms of Corinthians striker Yuri Alberto. Tell us some more about him. How close to the move do you think we are? And he was previously linked with Wolves in January, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's already had a go in Europe and did well with Zenit a couple of years ago. Started very, very well. Ended up moving back because of the military situation there, the war. But he's already shown a capacity to adapt to European football. He's been a little bit up and down in his career, Yuri Alberto. 23, he's had 5 minutes off the bench for Brazil in a friendly last year. Quick centre forward. He can play wide, but what he wants to do is play on the shoulder of the last defender. Quick, mobile striker, very good at getting in behind the line. As I understand it, he wants to move. The stalling point at the moment is Corinthians trying to make this a loan move with an obligation to buy. But the position of Corinthians is not particularly strong. They're in bad financial straits. So I think Southampton have considerable wiggle room to get this one over the line. They're already doing business in Brazil. They're losing Carlos Alcaraz, the central midfielder who was on loan at Juventus last season. He's coming here to Rio, to Flamengo, with the central midfielder Victor Hugo moving in the opposite direction, although I think Southampton will loan him to Turkey first. So Yuri Alberto, you can see the fit, mobile striker, likes to operate behind the line, and it seems at the moment there's a good chance that this might happen.
Tim, Brighton, not for the first time looking at buying from the South American market. Who are they interested in?
A Paraguayan central midfielder called Diego Gomez, who's currently playing with Messi in Inter Miami in Major League Soccer. Imperious young central midfielder, tall, strong, works box to box. You can play him further forward. He's got a crashing shot on him. Last seen in Paraguay's pretty good Olympic campaign. It looks like this one is well on the way. There are doubts, though, about whether it's going to happen now or in the January transfer window. And if it's the latter, we have the chance to talk about him all over again in a few months' time.
And I'm sure we will as well. And overall, Tim, I just want to get your thoughts on the window as a whole. Who has been your standout move this window? Who do you think is going to be the breakout star this summer with just a couple of days to go in the window?
Yeah, a couple of trends have interested me. One, which I'm sure has flown under your radar screen, is young South American talent going straight to Saudi Arabia. When Wesley, Corinthians winger, was linked over the window with a number of Premier League clubs, he's going to Saudi Arabia. Trend in the Premier League, more players, we've seen this over recent years, more players coming straight in from South America, especially from Brazil. But the move that I think really stands out is Savinho to Manchester City. Now, Brazil, since 1992, this for people of my age is an astonishing statistic. Since 1992, Brazil have now produced the 6th most players to have played in the Premier League. But I still don't think there's been a real, genuine, out-and-out Brazilian superstar. Quite often, that type of player has been lured to Real Madrid or Barcelona. Savinho could be the one. Very promising start with Manchester City. So that's the move, I think, that interests me most in what we've seen so far over the transfer window. Savinho to Manchester City.
Yeah, he certainly looks very, very exciting. Tim, thanks so much, and thank you for the window. We absolutely love having you on, so thanks again.
My pleasure. Speak to you again in January.
Right, still to come, we have got fresh developments on Federico Chiesa and a possible move to Liverpool. Stay with us. Let's bring you that breaking news then. We are told Liverpool are now in talks with Juventus over a deal for Federico Chiesa, and it's moving closer towards an agreement this afternoon. Discussions understood to be ongoing over an initial £10 million fee plus bonuses. Now, negotiations ongoing at the moment, but there is a confidence that a deal will be done. Now, Chiesa, we are told, has already said yes in principle to moving to Anfield. Liverpool, for their part, we are told, ready to give him a 4-year contract. So, Liverpool fans, it seems like this move for Federico Chiesa edging towards an agreement. Those talks understood to be ongoing this afternoon. Perfect timing then, because Italian football expert Mina Rizzucchi joins us live right now to react to that. Mina, great to see you again. It seems like this is now edging closer.
Yeah, it seems to be moving. So it's a story that's moved so quickly. I mean, yesterday when we were looking at what's going on, it seemed like Liverpool had just asked for information on Federico Chiesa, but that it was Barcelona that was looking to get the deal done. Spanish reports were that personal terms were being agreed, and Chiesa had okayed the deal and spoken to Hansi Flick. And then last night, the sporting director of Juventus met with the agent of Chiesa and several other directors from Juventus. So that's when it seemed like things were going to get really serious, and that there was a link to Liverpool that was now a genuine interest. An offer was looking to be made, and Chiesa was excited by the opportunity of moving to Liverpool. And obviously now, as we've heard from the breaking news, it seems like you can't really wait for Barcelona. Liverpool is the club chosen. They have shown the interest. 10 million is still perhaps a little too low for Juventus. It depends on what the bonuses are that they agree. But this is a bargain for what was once considered Italy's starlet.
You mentioned some of the options that he potentially had in this window. Was there ever an option for him to stay at Juve? Just outline the reasons why they are comfortable in letting this player go.
Are we asking Juventus directors, or are we asking the fans? Because the fans are up in arms about Federico Chiesa leaving, largely because of the promise he had shown, because he was going to be the future of the team. But it hasn't really worked out, and it's very difficult to blame the player for all of this. Obviously, when he arrived, he took the club by storm. He was brilliant to watch under Andrea Pirlo. So agile, so mobile, so direct in the way that he plays. And he was always coming to the rescue of Juventus. But unfortunately, he did suffer that ACL injury in January 2022. And we're yet to really see the player come back to the levels that we had seen previously. He's still hitting top speeds. He's still an incredibly great player when he accelerates. But unfortunately, it just seemed like with Max Allegri, who played a more cautious style of football, you could say very miserable style of football, it wasn't really great for the attackers of Juventus. And there was never this understanding between him and Chiesa. And it seemed like Chiesa's form just kept on dropping. And when it came to Thiago Motta taking over, we thought this would be the opportunity. But with 1 year left on his contract, nothing agreed. And all these rumours about him wanting so much money. Juventus has a sustainable issue. They want to be more sustainable. They want to rely on youthful players. And Thiago Motta decided that he's not the type of player that will fit into his plan. And so it's unfortunate for the fans, and he needs a place where he can start. But I'm not sure he's going to get that at Liverpool either.
Mina, there's a few concerns around potentially him being injury-prone. He obviously had that really big injury. How much of a worry is that?
Of course, it's always a worry when a player has an ACL injury and then he's really suffered off the back of that, because he missed a year dealing with that, and Juventus were patiently waiting for him to come back because he, for them, was the difference maker. So they were willing to wait however long was necessary. But even when he came back, there was always all these niggly injuries. I do want to caveat this with the fact that Italy and Juventus and Milan, as two examples, have suffered a lot with a lot of these injuries, and this will take time. But I do think that this is something that he can get out of. So I wouldn't necessarily say he's always falling injury into different things. He had an ACL. He suffered off the back of it. But hopefully, if he starts training properly and feels happy, I think that also will lead him to stay on his feet and be injury-free. But obviously, we don't know. It is always a worry. But we're talking about 10 million, so I would think it's a bargain.
I mean, I just wonder, what do you think he'll bring to Liverpool? And especially, what do you think he can bring that's unique compared to the options that they already have?
Unique is a difficult word, but he is an incredibly direct player, can play on the left or right, can even play as a second striker, although he's not really a huge fan of that, to be honest with you. But when he did, he was astonishing to watch. You really need to just watch the match, for example, in Euro 2020 when he played against Spain, even in the final. It's these tears, it's his acceleration, it's his dribbling movements. He can get past his man. He can hit top speeds, which are 34, 35 kilometers an hour. He covers a lot of ground. It's a little bit less so now as he's gotten a little bit older, but that also is something that depends on where he's been playing with Juventus and the style of football that they were playing as well. But the problem with Chiesa as well at times is that he's not somebody who occupies space in exactly the way that Italian coaches love or what is needed in Serie A. At times, he can't really rid himself of the marker. So the problem with Chiesa really has been that he hasn't yet connected with a coach who's been able to develop his talent. He's got bags full of talent, so much technique. But unfortunately, it's about reading the game and knowing how to play with your teammates, about knowing when to get rid of the markers, knowing how to free yourself up so that you can receive the ball and deliver and play with the others. And that's not really been his forte. His forte is at times head down, dribbles, gets really far. His acceleration is on show, and he's sort of almost a one-man band, always wanting to come to the rescue. Give me the ball. I'm going to run. I'm going to try to score a goal. And he's got a beautiful finish on him too. But it's about really incorporating into the team dynamics, sort of showing him the way. And I don't think he's really had that in Italy. And so it's about what he can develop and that relationship that he'll have with Arne Slot. If they can find that connection, I do genuinely think that Chiesa's technique will be on show and it'll be fun to watch.
Mina, just a question about his character. Obviously, there's a lot of talk among Juve fans that they absolutely adore him, they love him. But previously, there was comments from Allegri saying he's not really lived up to the expectation. And Thiago Motta immediately said, "I've got no plans for him." Is that a potential character problem, or as a character, is he maybe what Juve fans believe?
No, I don't think it's necessarily a character issue. They've never spoken about him as having a bad attitude, to be honest with you. It's more the tactical understanding of the game that he perhaps isn't the best at when it comes to Italian players. He's somebody who's got so much technique, but like I said, a lot of the times he seems to be a soloist. He likes to play to the rhythm of his own beat, and that can be a little bit frustrating for certain coaches where tactics, especially in Serie A, is the most important thing. He is very beloved by all the fans. I mean, Fiorentina fans were up in arms when he's leaving to Juventus. Juventus are still desperately sad to see their starlet leave, the man that they thought would be the future of the team. So it's not really his character. It's more about how he finds himself within the team and whether or not he can play as this part of unit. A lot of the times it's head down for him. So he needs to learn how to lift up his head, look for his teammates a little bit more and work on developing that and his ability in the spaces. But I wouldn't say there's anything that was attitude was a problem. He is the son of Enrico Chiesa. And when he's wanted to prove himself, Chiesa will work hard. He's determined to cut holidays short, come back, work really hard on being somebody special. But he also needs to feel loved and he needs to develop a relationship with a coach. And I think with Thiago Motta, I'm fairly certain that he had a few more years on his contract and Juventus weren't so desperate to sell because the contract was nearly up in 2025, then I'm sure that they would have found a way of incorporating him and making him a star.
I mean, if he needs to feel loved, he should come here because all Nabai does is talk about him all day. Away from Chiesa, what's going on with Osimhen? We've been talking about him all window. Do you think he'll stay at Napoli? Where do you think he'll end up?
You've been talking about more window. That's all we've been talking about over there as well. So they've received an offer from Saudi, which the player doesn't want to. He's holding out for an offer from PSG because ideally that's where he finds himself. And he is hoping that at one point PSG will come calling for him. Of course, the clause in his contract is for 130 million. But as we understand it, Napoli now need to unblock their dealings, their transfer dealings. They've already started to spend money because they're hoping that something will come back from Osimhen. They're willing to cut off 70 million at this point. They're going down on how much it is that they're asking for him. And Chelsea seem to be the most interested and willing to come in for him. I don't think Chelsea is his first choice. It seems that PSG was, from our understanding. But at this point, he doesn't want to stay to Napoli and he doesn't want to go to Saudi Arabia. So unfortunately for him, considering how much he makes and how much he costs, there's not that many available options for him.
Staying with Napoli, Scott McTominay, what do you think Napoli are getting in him? Is that a signing you're excited about?
I think that's a signing that Antonio Conte and Napoli are excited about. It's exactly the player that they are looking at, that they need right now. It seems like one of the issues that they had is that they have an attack that works. They have excellent wingers, but they need more midfielders. It's just not enough right now. They already had lost the likes of Zielinski to Inter, and they needed to replace somebody with dynamism and ability to win back the ball. And that's exactly what Antonio Conte wants to do, so that he can create a more dynamic and aggressive and hungry team that we haven't seen from Napoli. Napoli is usually that pretty team that's missing that kind of midfielder that McTominay can be. So if they can bring him, and they still have eyes on Billy Gilmour, then they'll have a complete midfield.
And Mina, what about Romelu Lukaku? Is he there? Has he arrived? What's going on there? Is he going to be there for Antonio Conte? A reuniting of Conte's favourite?
Yes, it seems like it's his blanket that he takes with him to every club. And Lukaku does do his best work under Antonio Conte. 24 goals at Inter under the manager. And this is a player, really, honestly, I think that with Antonio Conte, for him, when he arrived, he already knew that Osimhen was on his way out. So it was about finding a replacement at the time, because it looked like Osimhen didn't want to stay. And Lukaku is a player that he's worked with, that he knows can be powerful, that plays to the exact type of role that Conte needs to bring out the best of his team and those wingers that Napoli do boast. So it's about Lukaku has arrived now. He arrived in Rome, actually, to sign contracts with the owner, Aurelio De Laurentiis, and to do his medicals in Villa Stuart in Rome. And he arrived with Napoli fans already there, ready to welcome him. One of them even fell and he helped them up. And it was all this like Greek tragedy scene. Everyone's so excited to be watching him arrive. So we think he's going to make a difference. But we're excited about what Antonio Conte revolution at Napoli is going to look like. And for it to really kick off, then he needs a striker. And Lukaku always comes to the rescue when it comes to Conte.
Mina, great to get your thoughts. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
So let's just recap what we have learnt in the last few minutes, that Liverpool are in talks with Juventus over a move for Federico Chiesa, and crucially, it's moving towards an agreement with both clubs. Discussions understood to be ongoing over an initial £10 million fee plus bonuses. I think there's a bit of confidence now from both sides that this is going to get done. And also, another significant strand to this story, Chiesa has already said yes, in principle, to moving to Anfield. Liverpool are getting a 4-year contract ready for him to sign. So that is the news reaching us in the last 10 minutes or so here on Transfer Talk. And Abaid, how does Chiesa compare to Liverpool's current options?
Well, I think Mina's obviously spoken about his character, spoken about his time at Juve, spoken about managers that have coached him and what he needs. But actually, the interesting point here is how he fits into this Liverpool team and where he fits in. Of course, if you think about Salah and Jota, the right side attack is sorted and the central attack is sorted. And then you have 4 other options. And if you compare him here with his shot-creating actions to Darwin and Gakpo, he's ahead of both of those. Luis Diaz has been outstanding for the last 12 months. He's slightly ahead of Federico Chiesa. And as you move on to progressive carries, which I think is really important for Arne Slot's wingers, you've got to be able to drive. And that is what he excels in. Very close numbers to Luis Diaz. And I'd say they have a similar style in that regard. Left-sided attackers who want to come inside, take players on. I'd say Chiesa is much more of a powerful sprinter in possession. And then you look at successful take-ons. And again, Luis Diaz, I mean, he is the outlier in this. But as I mentioned, he's probably the 3rd striker. Chiesa comes in as your 4th option. He's ahead of Darwin Núñez. He's ahead of Cody Gakpo. And so you kind of go, OK, Chiesa is sort of settling into that 4th position. And then this is a really important one for an Arne Slot winger. Progressive passes received. Again, Luis Diaz is ahead of the other 3, but Chiesa and Darwin Núñez very, very similar, and Cody Gakpo down at the bottom. All the stats sort of lead to Chiesa being able to fit into either that left side or that right side, despite him playing as a sort of like shadow striker last season. I think, obviously, as Dan just said, I'm in love with the man. I think he's going to be completely fine. But the price for me is unbelievable, 10 million on there or thereabouts.
Yeah, the price certainly makes it very tempting for Liverpool, and the direction of travel this afternoon is that it seems like this is edging closer, Chiesa to Liverpool. If he's the only signing this window for Liverpool, is that a success for this window for Liverpool, Dan?
I said on Monday that I think Liverpool can be satisfied with what's happened this window. I like that Schlott's gone in there and he hasn't gone in there and reinvented the wheel. He's taken stock of what he's got at his disposal, looked at a lot of players, and the sign of a good coach is a manager that will go there and coach the players that are already there rather than panic buying and buying players for the sake of it. And I think what Michael Edwards has shown in the past, if it's not the right fee, if it's not the right player, we won't do anything. Obviously, Richard Hughes is the guy in charge of transfers with Edwards overseeing now. But I think it's good that Liverpool haven't been rushed into anything. They've spotted an opportunity here with Chiesa. There might be a few question marks over it that we discussed earlier, but at that price point, I think it's a risk that's definitely worth taking. It's probably not even a risk at that price because there's a massive upside. With Chiesa, I think in an ideal world, if they could have found the right number 6, I think Liverpool fans would like to see a bit of a refresh in the midfield area, someone that's more suited to what Slot wants than perhaps a couple of the midfielders that are there already. But I think you look at Liverpool's squad, you watch them play in the first 2 games, I still think it's exciting times.
And I think the injury question is something that's always going to get levelled at Liverpool for this one, but they have shown they're not afraid of doing deals for players who've had injuries in the past, thinking about Thiago, thinking about Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. If they spot a player who perhaps they think is undervalued, they're quite happy to strike and get the deal done. So that is what we've been talking about. Federico Chiesa in talks, Juventus in talks with Liverpool over a move and negotiations edging towards a conclusion. Will Arsenal sign a forward before the deadline in just 2 days' time? We'll talk about that. And we have news of a potential incoming for Steve Cooper at Leicester. Welcome back to Transfer Talk. Just a couple of days to go. 10 hours, 10 minutes, 30 seconds. Plenty still to be done from plenty of teams up and down the Premier League. Arsenal completed their second major signing, really, of this summer's transfer window yesterday, with Mikel Merino joining from Real Sociedad. The fee for the 28-year-old understood to be £31.64 million. Still things to be done at Arsenal as well, potentially outgoings and incomings too. Crystal Palace have agreed a deal in principle for Eddie Nketiah. The fee is thought to be worth up to £30 million. How do you assess Mikel Arteta's forward options this season?
Well, first of all, I think Arsenal have done really good business in terms of their outgoings. I think the fees that they're looking to get for Eddie Nketiah plus Emil Smith-Rowe, which they've got already from Fulham this window, their outgoings have been very impressive because that will go straight back in as pure profit, as we know. I think in terms of their forward options, you have to look at, the extent of the injury of Gabriel Jesus. We'll see how bad that is. But we've already seen them have a really impressive win against Aston Villa on the weekend, the likes of Kai Havertz and all the other attacking options they have in terms of Leandro Trossard and Bukayo Saka, who've already impressed this season. So it feels like Mikel Arteta has somewhat shifted his focus, I think, from a striker, which seemed to be the focus last January. Seems that that's gone away because of how Kai Havertz has performed, and I think with Nketiah leaving, I think he'll be reasonably happy, I think.
Ajax are still interested in Aaron Ramsdale too. Southampton are considering another offer. That follows the breakdown of Justin Bijlo's move from Feyenoord. Do you think that Aaron Ramsdale will be an Arsenal player come the end of the window?
I mean, he's desperate for a move, so you'd assume he's got a few teams around that are keen for him to go there. I think it's an interesting position for Aaron Ramsdale to be in, with the England team announcement coming around, and new coaching, potential new coaching method at England. He might be getting a bit more of a chance. Pickford hasn't had a great start to the season at Everton. So I think he needs a move, but there is only, 2 days, 10 hours, 8 seconds, that's wrong, 8 minutes. Can't read a clock, apparently.
Chiesa scrambled your head.
Yeah. Basically, long story short, he needs to move. There's not a lot of time left.
There isn't. You're absolutely right. News from Leicester to bring you as well. Bilal El Khanous is expected to have a medical today. The club have agreed a deal at just over £19 million to sign the attacking midfielder from Genk. He's a 20-year-old Morocco international. Leicester have needed reinforcements in forward areas. Have they done enough for you?
I still feel like Leicester lean number 9. Jamie Vardy's obviously there, and they've signed Jordan Ayew, but I do feel you need a goal scorer. They've added a few midfielders in that will give them a little bit of balance. I think the back line, I felt they needed a centre-back as well. So I think they're on the stretch, and Dan was saying earlier that I think you said you spoke to Steve Cooper, and it felt like they were a little bit frustrated by the fact they haven't got the business done that they actually want to get done. But it is difficult when a lot of opposition teams are signing players for more money and you're competing with that. So I do feel for Leicester and also Steve Cooper a little bit, but still some time to go. But I think a number 9 is needed.
Yeah, Wolves have agreed a fee of £10 million with Crystal Palace for goalkeeper Sam Johnston. Advanced negotiations are ongoing at the moment. That deal edging closer. I'm interested because Wolves obviously looked at Aaron Ramsdale, who would go into Wolves as number 1. Does Johnston go in as number 1 at Wolves?
I think at the moment he'll definitely be challenging, and I think when you look at Wolves' situation, I think it's fair to say that Jose Sarr's future could be uncertain at this point if this deal does go through for Sam Johnston. Now, Sarr is attracting interest from the likes of Saudi Arabia, but I think Johnston, he had a few injuries last season. He had an elbow and a calf injury, so he did miss a bit of time. But other than that, he's never had previous, bad injury records or anything like that. And we know he's an incredibly good shot stopper. Gareth Southgate really valued him in the England national side, of course, as well. And I think what we saw on the weekend against Chelsea was perhaps, although Wolves' defence was a bit leaky, Jose Sarr's distribution could be better, I think, in terms of the way Gary O'Neill wants to play. And I think Johnston, I'm not saying he's maybe as good as Ramsdale with his feet, but I do think he's a slight upgrade in that department.
Ipswich have completed the signing of Chiesa Ogbeni from Luton for £8 million today. Dan, how impressed have you been with Ipswich's business so far?
Yeah, I think Ipswich will see themselves in a decent place, but I'd expect there to be a few more incomings before the window shuts. I think Ugarte is a very, very direct. He'll get Ipswich up the pitch. We saw against Liverpool that they would prepare to play in transition, and I think Kieran McKenna wants to have a bit of variety in his attack. So Ugarte will add to that. He's still got room to grow. Maybe his end product could do with a little bit of work at times, but I think he was very impressive for Luton last season.
OK, just to recap the breaking news that we brought you a little bit earlier. Liverpool in talks with Juventus and a kind of acceptance now that it seems like Federico Chiesa is going to be a Liverpool player. He's agreed a deal in principle. Liverpool have got a 4-year contract ready and waiting for him. Negotiations are ongoing over a £10 million fee with bonuses on top of that. Good Morning Transfers back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Do join us for that. And coming up next, we're live to Wales. Craig Bellamy names his first squad for their upcoming Nations League fixtures.